reschedule meeting. And if you can see the agenda, it may not all get accomplished during this first 50 minutes or so. And if not, we will certainly take our time and call an extra meeting this afternoon. But we're going to skip around a bit because we've got some special guests that are presenting on various bills. So the first one I'll call up is Senate Bill number 2311. This is our theft and fraud, criminalized activity related to mail and credit cards. And Gordon, I will recognize you. He represents our Friends of the Banking Association. They are promoting this piece of legislation. So if you'll speak into one of the microphones, if they tell me they can, you can sit down if you'd like. I'm at the table.
Yeah, I'll hang out with you guys. How about that?
That'd be great.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee. It is rare for the Bankers Association to come before Judd B with a suggestion here, but we have a problem, and it's a national problem. The Postal Service no longer has the requisite number of postal inspection policemen to adequately police the mail. And as a result of this, check fraud has grown tremendously. Checks are being stolen out of mailboxes, stolen out of the Postal Service, forged, washed, and folks are losing money over it. So, and because there's not enough adequate law enforcement, the Postal Service is not really getting prosecuted to the degree we think it should be. So we are suggesting that the state establish a state postal fraud regime similar to federal law to create some more disincentives on these checks being stolen from the mail. And we're not the first state to do it. Louisiana did it last year. It was a really good idea in our opinion. I wish we would have thought of it. We didn't, but we're glad to try to be second here in line. And I know a lot of other states around the country saw what Louisiana did last year and is considering this. So happy to talk about this if there are any questions.
Thanks for the explanation, Senator Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are we tracking the same penalties that are being imposed in federal law?
Penalties?
Yeah.
No, so the penalties are similar to existing state law. So if you look at Section 5 of the bill, that's a code section y'all passed a few years ago, 97, 21, 23, and the penalties mirror that.
So line 272, that's new language?
272, right? So the only change for the existing law is we added chip cards because the law y'all passed a few years ago said strike cards and chip cards weren't around yet.
So the 1 to 10 years and a $20,000 fine, is that the fine that we actually, the penalty we had a few years ago? Is that a new penalty?
Years ago, now would be applied to fraudulent checks, not just card skippers. Does that make sense? Good question.
And okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Senator McCon.
Pertinent question. So where's this going to be housed at? You say this is or is this just putting in the code section?
Yes. So any state law enforcement.
Originally, you just said that we create our own vision for this. We're not doing that.
No, there's no new law enforcement division created. It would just give existing law enforcement authority. Right. Sorry if I misexplained that. Thank you.
Senator Hickman.
So under current law, yes, it's not working. Under current law, what would happen if someone committed these crimes and they're caught or what have you? Are they being prosecuted under any type of statute or what?
Not under state law. So if you stole a check right now out of the mail, right, then you would be possibly subject to federal prosecution, but not state prosecution. Now, if you tinkered with cards, then there is some state law. And so part of this bill updates the existing card law to reflect chip cards that didn't exist when the old law was drafted.
Okay, any other questions? All good ones? Senator Hill?
Just for motion.
Okay, any other questions? Senator Simmons? Okay. Senator Hill, you recognize.
Motion's title sufficient, do pass.
For the motion, all in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. The ayes have it. All right, thank you so much, and we appreciate you, Mr. Fellows, for bringing that to us. The next bill we'll take up is Senate Bill number 2309. Gregory, are you ready from the Attorney General's office on this one? All right, you're recognized. 2309. Probably want to come sit over here, maybe at the end of this table, yeah. Don't mess with Chairman Turner over here. All right,
I don't want to bump her.
no one can displace
forward
Senator
from your
Turner.
seat.
You can forget that. All right, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chairman Phillingain and members of the committee. This 2309 is a child grooming bill. We're very excited to bring this to the committee. We think it is a transformative piece of legislation that will add another tool in Mississippi's toolbox to, really add to the resources that we have on child exploitation. I brought one of our prosecutors over here, Brandon Ogburn, who is the head of our public integrity division, who can talk more to the prosecution side of what we do in the office and, how this bill would work in reality. But this bill does three things. It creates a felony offense for child grooming. And it's important to keep in mind that we're talking about children here when we're talking about this crime of child grooming. And if you are over 21 years of age, so if you're 22 and over, and you are engaging in a pattern of conduct or communication to gain access to, gain the compliance of, to prepare, persuade, induce a child, which we have defined as anybody who is under 16 years of age. So we're really talking about a child that is 15 years of age and younger. If somebody who is over 21 is engaging in that kind of conduct with the child and that kind of communication with the purpose to engage in sexually explicit conduct, which is defined by statute, human trafficking, or sexual servitude, this bill would create a felony offense for that. A couple of other states have passed this. We've seen cases in our office where this conduct has occurred. We have not been able to, go after the person for engaging in this kind of conduct with a child. The second thing it does is it adds child grooming as a registrable sex offense. And the third thing at the back end of the bill, you'll see that the definitions for depicting a child engaging in sexual conduct are amended to remove identifiable child from those code sections. That was a change that was made last year that was inserted by the House into a totally unrelated bill that y'all passed last year related to social media and the Walker-Montgomery Protecting Children Online Act to require that the child be an identifiable child for the definitions for depicting a child engaging in sexual conduct. We've actually had problems with that definition being amended and, prosecuting someone who's depicting a child from, a picture that everybody would know that it's a child, but since it's not an identifiable person, because it may not even be a real person, because it may be an AI generated photograph, we've had problems prosecuting under that statute. So that cleans that up to take it back to where it was originally before that change was made last year. I'm happy to answer any questions on it. This bill before you is really modeled in mostly after Georgia's statute, which passed unanimously through their legislature. And I want to reemphasize that we're really talking about, the bill says it's a pattern of conduct or communication. We're not talking about a one-time text message. This is we're talking about manipulation, building a relationship with a child. We've all heard these stories where adults are engaging in communication with children, and I certainly wouldn't want it for my child. And we have tried to make the elements as specific as possible, that we are talking about conduct over time that goes on to ultimately engage in the act of physical hands-on abuse of human trafficking, sexual servitude, and those are the things, or sexual explicit conduct, and those are the things that we want to prohibit in the state of Mississippi. It's important to Attorney General Fitch to protect children in this state, and this is a bill that we've been working on for a while, and we think it's a really good piece of legislation. I'm happy to answer any questions y'all have, and I'm also happy to introduce in a second if there's more specific questions on the actual prosecution or how this is different than child enticement. Brandon Ogburn, who was the director of our cybercrime division for over a decade. He's a phenomenal prosecutor, and he leads our public integrity division that actually works on these issues, protecting our children on a daily basis. So really appreciate Chairman Fillingham, you putting this on the agenda and letting us speak about it, and we're happy to answer any questions that y'all have.
All right, I have a few. So to begin with, if you can give us, I know not names obviously, but examples of what you're trying to prevent and that you're having problems prosecuting under the current statutory scheme.
Yeah, Brandon, I'm gonna turn it over to you in a second, but what we are trying to prevent is the communication to the minor, that a child that is 15 years of age and under, and somebody who is at least 7 years older, somebody who's 22 and over, it's usually somebody who's a lot older, which makes it even worse. We're trying to prohibit that communication and that building of the relationship, that manipulation, the deceit. A lot of times building relationships with family members to gain the trust, gain the compliance of, and then you see the sexual act that happened on the news. I mean, we're trying to prohibit the build up to the point before the physical hands-on abuse occurs.
Talking about teachers or coaches that are texting, sending messages to their students, talking dirty to them, asking about risque events to build a relationship, a pattern, so that ultimately they end up having sex later on. The parents call the prosecutor and say, what's going on? We're trying to, send our kids to a safe environment at a private, public, whatever type of school it is. And the prosecutors are saying, well, there was nothing we could do to prevent this. We don't have the tools wherewith to stop communications. We can stop and punish the act, but we can't stop the build up to the act. Is that what you're trying to describe?
That's exactly correct, Chairman Fillingham. And that's, a lot of the times, and I can let Brandon more speak to the, calls that we get from parents, but, that is exactly what this is trying to prohibit. That, deceitful manipulation where the adult knows exactly what they're doing and the child has no idea what is going on. And then 6 months, a year down the road, you see the sexual abuse that actually happens to the child. So, the key words, the pattern of conduct or communication is very crucial. We're not, like I said, not talking about the one-off text message where you look beautiful or something like that. It is a building of a pattern and communication that we would have to prove that this adult is talking with this 15-year-old in this way to engage in the sexual act that will happen down the road.
And you're also not talking about the 19-year-old fraternity brother that's texting his high school sweetheart who happens to be 17 or 18, still in high school because they've been dating for a while. Now he's in college and she's still in high school, and you're not talking about that sort of thing.
That's right. And, I have tried to do my best. I think I've spoken to most every committee member in here before this bill was brought up, maybe one or two I haven't spoken to, but, that is exactly right. We changed the age for this bill is under 16. Yeah, that's different from all the other child exploitation statutes on the age of a minor. It's obviously different from the age at the end of the bill for depicting a child in sexual conduct, that we're amending that to remove identifiable minor. We have been tried to be very intentional that this is really about children. I mean, somebody that is 15 years of age and younger, in our opinion, no adult 22 years and older should be engaging in this type of communication with a minor to engage in this sexual act. I mean, that is what we want to prohibit, and we think it makes the state of Mississippi a safer place. So,
All right, I think question, Senator Simmons.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you asked my first question. I was trying to figure out under our current statutory scheme what you are not allowed to do, because I know human trafficking is a crime. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I
And,
mean,
and then also child exploitation, that's a crime.
correct.
So, and then also attempt under our current law, if you attempt any act, you don't get a benefit for failure to complete that act. So could our prosecutors use the attempt statute and case law surrounding attempt with our existing laws on the book for human trafficking to prevent the conduct that you are speaking of? That's my question.
Yeah, the elements are different here from the enticement statute. And Brandon, do you want to speak more towards that about just how this is different from what we already have and how this is actually a new tool? We're not recreating or something that we already have. It's actually something that will benefit the tools that you use to prosecute these individuals.
Morning, ladies and
You'll speak
gentlemen.
to the microphone. We have people watching online who can't hear unless you use the microphone.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Everyone hear me? I believe Mr. Austin did a good job of explaining that. This particular proposed legislation is different than the enticement or child exploitation statutes. It has different elements, trying to prevent conduct, which is different than some of the elements, the crimes contemplated under the exploitation, such as within the exploitation statute, you are probably aware, or surely are aware, considers multiple other things, such as the possession of child sexual abuse images, the production of child sexual abuse images, and there's one subsection that deals with the solicitation to meet for sexual conduct. This particular proposed legislation, the grooming bill, contemplates making this conduct criminal, which would, and grooming or sending this material to children, the communication with children in the hopes of coercing them or soliciting them to meet for sexual conduct, to get them engaged in human trafficking and sexual servitude. So as Gregory said, I believe the elements are different. This proposes to criminalize conduct before the children are abused physically, or the hands-on offenses. It gives us an extra tool to basically prevent situations in the past where the conduct didn't necessarily cross the line as to the meeting or hands-on offenses, but allows us to prevent these children and protect these children.
And if I can say one more thing on that, Senator Simmons, I think one of the things that we were discussing while we were writing this bill is, this is different from asking the child to meet for sex. This is before, we're talking about a pattern of time where the adult knew exactly what they were doing to abuse this child, and before the actual physical act occurs. So
And my only concern is, how do you prove what the adult knew? Under our existing statutes, the images that the DA talked about that you may have sent via text or email, or those items would be part of the case to prove the current violation of our current statutes. So those same things, as what I'm hearing, based upon what you are proposing, you can still target that conduct unless you purely want to try to criminalize communication. And so that's problematic, and for so many reasons, because still the communication, you have to prove some unlawful intentional act. And I just think under our current statutes, you can do that. But if this child grooming bill is to prevent any and all communications with minors that's under the age of 15, I think it's a little problematic, Gregory. I just want to be honest about how I feel about it.
can I respond to that, Chairman Phillingham? Yeah, and I think I want to make clear, we're not preventing any and all communication to minors. This is, there has to be a purpose to engage in sexually explicit conduct, human trafficking, or sexual servitude. So we have to prove, we have the burden of proving, those elements. We're not, the communication any communication to the minors, that is certainly not what the bill contemplates. I mean, this is, like I said, what we believe is a criminal act of building this a line of communication and this relationship and this trust and, you know, inducing, preparing, persuading this child to, you know, engage with you down the road of a sexual act is what we are trying to prohibit, that road from going to that sexual physical abuse when it occurs, not just any line of communication with the minor.
And I believe under child enticement, if I'm engaged in that type of communication, child enticement could be proven. If not, please tell me, or give me a set of facts or the DA where the act that you claim was actually being conducted by someone over the age of 21 to someone under the age of 15, where it could not have been prosecuted under our current statutory scheme. That's what I want to know. Yeah.
This is Lindsay Cranford, our Deputy Attorney General.
I'm the Deputy Attorney General. I know a good many of you guys. So I want to help address the question that the senator has. Our current statutory framework under 97-533 criminalizes a great deal of conduct, but it doesn't criminalize the grooming process that happens immediately before the perpetrator requests the child to actually engage in sexually explicit conduct. So under 97-533, there is a code section that says that if an adult solicits a child to engage in sexually explicit conduct, and I'll just be blunt, they say, would you like to meet to have sex? Okay. Then we know at that moment a criminal act has occurred. But a lot of times the conversation exchanges that happen before that, they may happen over a course of days, months, sometimes years, depending on if it's a position of trust or authority. It may be small talk, so to speak, where it begins with something innocent, you know, a conversation between a coach and a student that starts with just talk about practice and then escalates at some point later to, I really like how you look today. And then escalates at some point later to, you know, you look really cute in that outfit. Can you send me a picture of that? That is not criminalized under 97-533. It's just conversation, but it's conversation that a reasonable person may look at, like a parent may look at their text message streams between the child and the coach and say, this person is beginning to escalate into a pattern of trying to engage with my child to build on that trust in order to get them to engage in further activities later on. So in essence, what the bill is trying to do is give law enforcement and parents an opportunity to step in on those conversations when they see that they're occurring and give them an opportunity to try to stop it.
So I can understand. So I want to stop you there. So that communication that you look good in the dress, if this bill became law, that's a crime in Mississippi.
Done is we've said you have to engage in a pattern of conduct and communication.
Yes,
So no one act should constitute a pattern, right?
And so at line 23, that defines pattern of conduct or communication.
So it's a pattern of conduct or communication that would cause a reasonable adult person to believe that the person is communicating with the child with the purpose to engage, coerce, solicit, or prepare a child to engage in sexually explicit conduct, human trafficking, or sexual servitude. So a reasonable person. So I think that's going to be something that a reasonable person is going to have to be left to, in other words, like a jury question, if it goes that far. You'll know it when you see it in some cases. Now, I will say this, just in candor toward the whole committee, some of this, and Gregory and I have spoken about it, and Brandon and I have too, every prosecutor is different, right? We're not all built the same. Some of them may not exercise the same kind of caution and discretion in charging. Law enforcement may not either. But I think that this is a good place to start and then further define, you know, as instances arise, is there a time frame that we're comfortable with? I hesitate to say, you know, it has to be this many separate communications because, you know, you give people a number and then perpetrators learn to work around that to try to continue to engage with kids and stay in the bounds of the law. It's a loophole. This is broad enough that I think it allows reasonable people to make a decision about how the conversation has grown. But it's also limited enough to where, you know, you have to have a pattern over time. Now, you know, I think we would certainly be open to discussing if y'all had feelings about a particular amount of time that you'd like that communication to go on. I'll say from just anecdotal evidence and my own personal experience, I've seen stuff like this happen in our undercover operations where it may be within a matter of minutes that a perpetrator thinks that they're speaking with a child, and they may escalate that conversation through a series of text messages right up to the point of asking for the child to engage in sexually explicit conduct, but they're not quite there. In those situations, law enforcement has to kind of just stand back because we're not there yet. They haven't actually violated the law. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I guess my concern is with child enticement, though, you will use those same type of communications or the proof in order to charge and or get a conviction. And based upon what you said, I guess the other side of it that I'm concerned about is if there was a pattern, you look nice in this dress, or do you want Chick-fil-A, and nothing ever happens, and this bill was law, we can charge that teacher or that coach with child grooming, even though at the time that that person was engaged in the communication, they had no intent whatsoever to do any of the conduct that we're trying to regulate. But with this bill becoming law, they could be charged with child grooming. Isn't that correct?
I think that the language would have to be spoken with the intent, purpose to entice, coerce, solicit, or prepare a child to engage in sexually explicit conduct, human trafficking, or sexual servitude. So just by itself, how you look nice in that dress, or do you want Chick-fil-A today? That's not, you'd agree with me, that's not sexually explicit. That's not, it doesn't tend to prove that they're, you know, trying to engage a child in conduct. I think it has to be something more than that. And I think that's the hook.
Yeah. And if this bill was law today and someone engaged in that conduct and a law enforcement agency, they determined that it met the elements and a prosecutor prosecuted the person and the person was later found not guilty, they still will have to deal with the whole process of being charged with child grooming, even though they completely believed and a jury of their peers found that they were not engaged in that particular conduct and their reputation is harmed forever.
I think the system would, you know, our justice system would have to work, you know, the way that it does in every other case with law enforcement, prosecutors, checks and balances, and then eventually a jury trial.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Gregory. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
For the question, Senator Hill.
I think you had asked for an example when you first opened this question up. I just wanted to say that I had a mom contact me that was in this situation with a 12-year-old child and a 30-something-year-old married woman. And the text messages were very explicit, but she never did come out and asked him to meet her for sex. But any reasonable person could look at those text messages and tell it was grooming. So there is an example in this state, and I've seen it, and I have the emails from the mother that I could actually find and print if necessary.
Senator Sparks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The and Gregory had spoken with me about this bill prior to today, but I just want to make sure a couple things that I'm clear on. If the assuming a parent comes to you similar to what Senator Hill just described, and they have found on Messenger this litany of messages that have come from this adult to their under 16-year-old child, and they're angry because it appears to them that it is an attempt to forward to sexual activity, you're saying you don't have a tool to prosecute that today.
That is correct.
And this would allow you that tool under the determination. And I share some of Senator Simmons' concerns that it's, you know, what's a reasonable person's standard, but there are circumstances where people who are monitoring their children's electronic communications ultimately see somebody that's in their direct messages or whatever that's not, it's not a good situation. And this would give you a tool, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Does no physical act has to ultimately occur to charge under this section, correct?
That's correct.
And I do have some concern, and it gets into the solicitation piece from law enforcement, because from 99 to 103, we've already said identifiable child. They're trying to strike that, which, don't get me wrong, anybody using AI generated childlike photographs or video is way out of bounds. It ought to be something that doesn't happen in a civilized society. But in the case of the undercover operative, law enforcement, now it's not the local adult who is reaching out to the minor. It is law enforcement reaching out to someone who would violate. Am I reading that correctly?
Referring to this or to 97-533?
Well, I'm referring to lines 99 through 103 in section 1, which is in 97-532.
Yes, sir. This,
Okay.
this is the same language that I believe is included in 97-533, which is, it allows law enforcement to act as undercover operatives. That's that's the authority that allows us to conduct operations undercover across the state of Mississippi in order to try to detect people who are willing to meet children for sex. And we've been fairly successful in having those operations around the state. There are always people that are willing to meet, but yes, you're correct. It would allow law enforcement to act in that capacity.
But yet not have the offer of the act. That's where it's getting real touchy when I say law enforcement now can go solicit responses, but those responses do not have to arise to the level of an ask for the act, which is a crime, when that person is represented to be underage. So as we move through the process, we might want to think about that part, since this part is not consummation or even the ask for consummation. I have no problem with the discovery of that being prosecuted, but the fishing for that, to create it without the ask, may be getting a little bit broad. But
Yes, and I can see exactly, your point there. And I think this was language that was added in because it replicated what was in 97-533. In my personal opinion, the main problem that I think we're trying to address here is when parents recognize that their kids are engaged in communications and they want to have an opportunity to stop it. That is the real problem I think that we're trying to address at this moment. So if that's something that the committee is interested in pushing forward with, and we had to amend to remove this other language, I don't think that that is a concession that, we would have a problem with.
And I would be glad to add a reverse repealer if that's a better way to handle it, or offer the amendment to simply remove paragraph 8.
Either would be fine, or both, but if you want to offer the amendment to what you just spoke to, I think it would be timely.
Okay, then I would offer the amendment to remove the language in numbered 8 in lines 99 through 103, which I understand why it was put in there, but after hearing the discussion, I would move that language be stricken.
Any questions about the amendment by the author of the amendment? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Right, I think
Thank y'all.
Senator, did Senator Hickman have a question? I think I overlooked him earlier.
I just had a quick question. Of course, I have a daughter and I want to protect children as well. But one of the things that I do as a parent is I routinely check her communication and who she's communicating with. And I do think this is a body that has been extremely conscious of parents having autonomy over their children and their rights and all of that kind of stuff. So that shakes me a little bit. But my question is, understand that you're saying other states are doing this. How many other states have done this or passed this particular law?
Defer to Gregory on that one, on exactly how many. I know there are several.
Senator Hickman, it's 3 that have like very similar elements to this, Arkansas, Texas and Georgia. I mean, looking at this over along the past year. I mean, there's obviously, you have to dig down to separate the elements from enticement to grooming. So, I mean, there's numerous states that have what I would call similar language, but I mean, the ones the real ones that we were looking at, like Georgia that passed it unanimously, that's what this is based off of. Really, the elements are based off of the Georgia law.
And so that leads to my next question. Do we know, if Georgia has used this statute or how much they've used this statute to prosecute it? And my questions are this. Again, I appreciate the idea and I want us to protect our children in this state, but I also kind of agree or go along the lines with Sharon Simmons. I think we have a mechanism to prosecute this. I know you're telling me that we don't, but in my mind, if this is a, like I think Senator Sparks said, a litany of messages that go to the point where they're sexually explicit and all this kind of stuff, I think there's a mechanism that we can use. But even more than that, you said something that was very interesting to me, that, oh, we don't know a number to set because they'll go to that number and I'm guessing they would fall off. But if their real intent is to traffic or go to that point, they don't stop. And so I think, I don't see how we couldn't set it, because if their real intent is to do that, no criminal who has the real intent to sexually exploit someone or to human traffic someone is going to say, oh, the limit of message I can send is 20, and then I'm going to cut off, because we're not prosecuting, from my understanding, the communication. It is the communication with the intent as well. And so if their intent is actually to do this, they're not going to send 10 messages and then cut off. So I guess my question is, I just want to make sure, and we can talk about this, I just want to make sure that under current law, we can't, in an easier way, tweak something to make sure that we can fit these instances in there. Because again, I want it to be very clear that I want to prevent this, but I don't want to clog our books and create a situation where we're causing more harm than preventing harm, if that makes sense. So I guess overall, my question is, how many instances are we seeing where you're like, oh my God, this is horrible. You got to tell this mother and father, I can't prosecute. And then if you know how often this is prosecuted in other states.
I can't speak to how many times this has been prosecuted in other states. I can say that right now, off the top of my head, we just closed a case in our cybercrime division that we could not prosecute. That was between a male, I think he was 14 or 15 years old, and a student and his teacher. And it went on for quite some time. And I think to any party in here, the communication thread would have thrown off alarm signals, but it just did not go far enough. And, that's a sad situation to tell a parent that, you feel like you can't help them in that regard. We see in the cybercrime division specifically, because of the nature of our undercover operations, we have the opportunity to see the way that perpetrators will communicate with what they think is a child. And I would say in a lot of those situations, even though it is beginning with law enforcement, it gives us that opportunity to kind of look through the window of what those text message communications look like over just a very short period of time. And I will say those are very alarming. Now, the ones that come and meet us, we prosecute those under 97-533. And so we're able to bring those to a conclusion. The ones that don't, oftentimes we may, flag those, follow them, see if there's any other communication. Can we do a knock and talk or something like that to follow up on those cases? But I would say the vast majority of those where they just haven't gone far enough over that short window, those we have to push to the side and move on to other things. I hope that answers your question somewhat.
Yeah, and I would just, and that's fine. I would like to strengthen the bill, and I think you talked about it some, is putting, I guess, some stronger stops or defining things a little bit more than they're defined in here. And I think that would take a little time, but that's just again, I agree with the concept and the idea. I just don't want us to create more harm than
There already is.
I appreciate your questions and your sentiment on that because I do agree. When you limit communication, you do have to be very serious about how you define that. So I do appreciate all those concerns as well. We're open to discussion on any of that we need to.
Okay, Senator Simmons?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment.
Recognized. Go ahead.
Yep. My amendment is to bring forward the child enticement as well as child exploitation statutes. Can we do that? To bring the,
Make sure they make it subject to a point of order, but
oh,
the council says it does not. So, yeah, if you're recognized.
so basically, I strongly believe that this is conduct that we actually can still prosecute under our existing statutory scheme, but to the extent we need to look at those statutes to target the conduct that the Attorney General is trying to target. I'm all in favor of that. So as this bill goes through the process, I would just like to make sure we bring those code sections forward. And if we need to look at those statutes and amend those statutes appropriately, then this will give us the opportunity to do that. So
All right, any questions for the author of the amendments? Not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay?
and also, Mr. Chair, my last one is to put a reversal pillar in the bill.
You've heard the offer of a reverse repealer, tongue-tied. Any questions on that? All in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have an amendment also. I would like to strike the portion that makes the grooming a registrable sex offense. I think that if you're not getting to the point of asking for sexual communication of any sort or consummation, certainly to register that as a sex offense is a bridge too far personally for me, but y'all may feel differently and I'm happy to be run over. I often am. So that would be my offer of the amendment on this language. Any questions? All right, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed, nay? The ayes have it. All right, Senator Wiggins.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be as brief as I can, and my questions are for, who actually has prosecuted the cases. Okay, if you look at lines 45 to 53, so let me ask, have you prosecuted the cases before a jury? Okay,
Talking to me or Brandon?
whoever.
We both have.
Okay, so then I look at lines 45 through 53. Well, if you've prosecuted, then you know what an elements instruction is, correct?
Correct.
And an elements instruction is the elements of the crime that have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and every element has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. If you don't prove that, then the person has to be, or it's acquitted, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so lines 45 through 53, to me, that's the elements of this crime. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if I look at that, I go, okay, there are 5 elements. Less than 21, the child is under 21, over the age of 21. There's a pattern of conduct or communication. Number 3, through someone or something, be it an electronic device, computer, social media. Number 4, to gain access to the child. And number 5, to engage in sexually explicit conduct. So if there's communication through something and it is not to engage in sexually explicit conduct, it cannot be convicted. Is that correct?
Would be correct.
Okay, and that's the behavior you're trying to get at, correct? Right.
So there has to be a
Which is line 46. And knowingly is required under the constitutional law and put in, and if it's not in the indictment, it could very well be constitutionally invalid, correct? Okay, so I'm satisfied that the elements that you're trying to get at are there. I do have concerns that has been raised here about if you're texting a child and somebody, you're going to be arrested just because you're texting them. I have a big concern. And I also have a concern that the Attorney General's office goes, well, you know what? We're just going to try. We're just going to try this. The reason, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, that y'all are having problem is because criminal law statutes are interpreted with strict construction. And so we walk in here and we go, you know what? I had a family member or I had a friend and we're going to make that a crime. That's not how the law works, correct? It has to be strictly construed. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, yes, you're correct. Criminal.
Okay, and so whatever change we made, it sounds like y'all are having problems because somebody somewhere has ruled it's strictly construed. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, sir, that's not how this came.
But Gregory, you said y'all are having problems prosecuting somewhere.
No, sir. What we're saying is, through our investigations, we are noticing conduct that we think should be criminalized.
Right,
And we're not
grooming,
able to
right.
bring any charges on those cases because the statutory framework is not in place.
Right, grooming, which is what you're doing here.
Correct.
Okay, I may have misunderstood. All right, so then, Mr. Chairman, so then I go down to section 59, I'm sorry, line 59, and you talk about a position of trust. Okay, but it's a little unclear because even though it's a position of trust, your penalty is higher. But in the other, like the sexual battery statutes and other, a position of trust, generally speaking, applies to when the child is 18, or the person is 18. If the person is 18 in the position of trust, then they can be charged, not just 21. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, this is a little differently phrased than the sexual battery statute for position of trust or authority. This is intended to cover, for the
So
example.
what if an 18-year-old is in a position of trust and they commit and they groom a child?
Well, the statute says that the person has to be over the age of 21.
That's my
to commit
point. So you
grooming.
won't be able.
So we would
you
not be
wouldn't
able to.
So my amendment, I have an amendment, Mr. Chairman, that in line 59, it says, any person who violates this section, and my amendment would be against a child under the age, I'm sorry, who, is 18 or over while that person was in a position of trust, and then they can be charged. Does that, y'all understand what I'm saying? Yeah, so the intent is to capture somebody who's in a position of trust, but less than 21 years of age. So if they're 18 years old and they're in a position of trust, then they can be charged. Because if you look at line 45, the element is you have to be over the age of 21. So back to line 59, it would be any person who violates this section while that person was in a position of trust, there you go. Thank you very much. That's similar to what the sexual battery is. Okay.
Okay.
Does that make, because you can have, for example, and I know one specifically, you can have a soccer coach at a school who is like a paraprofessional soccer coach who is coaching children, or I'm sorry, high school students, and he's in a position of trust and he's grooming the children. I mean, that's something you're trying to get at, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Right, Senator Hill, did you have a question for Senator Wiggins?
Yes, so this, taking it down to 18 only affects positions of authority, whereas on line 45, the age of 21, that affects anybody that's grooming a child. Okay.
That's correct. And just to explain that, because their language says over the age of 21, which means in order to convict that person would have to be over the age of 21. But if they're in a position of trust and they're under 21, then they can still be convicted. And the whole point, and if you look down at line 66, it lists who's in a position of trust: teacher, counselor, physician, psychiatrist. And that's generally how that works,
And
right?
that's actually, I think, the language taken from the sexual battery definition of position
Okay.
of trust or authority. It was meant to relate back to that.
All right. So that would be my amendment, Mr.
Senator Hill, you have a question?
So paraprofessionals would not be included in that section. They would have to be 21, correct? The way,
Correct.
okay, so I'm okay with that. I just wanted to make that delineation because the person that the mama called me about was a paraprofessional, not a teacher.
Well, we can actually add them in.
Coach listed on line 70, so.
Okay.
It wasn't a coach, it was just an employee of the school.
And that,
I'm kind of a little concerned about taking it down to 18, honestly. Because 18 and 15, I mean,
Well, that's the law in our sexual battery statute.
Okay.
That's the law in our other criminal statutes. And the whole point of a position of trust is despite your age, you in your position have been put in a
agree.
trust
I
over the
agree.
child.
Senator England, I think had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just an easy question. We did put a reverse repealer in this bill, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Understanding, yeah.
I, okay, well, I have a motion to, another motion at the proper time, which would be title sufficient do pass committee sub.
Right. In light of our time, I think we have a Senator Wiggins amendment first. So any other questions for Senator Wiggins amendment? If not, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The ayes have it. All right, and then
One last
Wiggins,
question.
go for it.
So with it being a position of trust and back to my discussion on the elements, if the perpetrator was in that, that would be an element of the crime that you would have to prove, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, any other questions, comments? Y'all always amaze me at how well y'all dissect these bills and make them better, hopefully. All right, any other questions? If not for a motion,
Title sufficient do pass committee sub.
heard the motion, all in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We're going to do recess subject to chair because I'm told this room is empty immediately following our adjournment this morning. So if it's well with the committee, we'll just offer motion to recess subject to call the chair. I'm sorry. Yeah, but that's 10:30. That's, she's gonna reschedule? All right, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Any opposed, nay. Thanks. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. We have a quorum from earlier this morning, so we will recognize Senator Turner Ford. If she would like to talk to us about Senate Bill number 2355, and I think there is an amendment that we would like to explain as well when you get to that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and that is correct. Senate Bill 2355 is a bill that proposes to add to Schedule 3, kratom, I would say components of it would be added to the schedule. Kratom, as we know, is a naturally occurring plant. Although it is not indigenous to the United States, it is being used in various quantities for various reasons. And the language that it is operative in the bill is found, give me just a moment, at line 255. The original bill was amended by the Drug B Committee to state that any chemically synthesized compound mixture or preparation which contains quantities of metrogenine or 7-hydroxymetrogenine, which is referred to as 7-OH, and its salt, polymers, et cetera, would be added to the schedule. What is being proposed to be amended, if I may be recognized to explain, after on line 257, following kratom, comma, this language would be added. And 7-hydroxymetrogenine and or 7-OH metrogenine in excess of 1% of the total alkaloid composition of the kratom product would be added or amended. And the reason for that would be to try to make sure that we capture those compounds that exceed 1% in their quantity of these substances. I think the naturally occurring plant, those quantities are about 0.5%.
Mr. Hill, question?
In regard to that drug, is 1% a lot?
I believe it is, and I've seen in some media reports that some of those products contain as much as 2%.
Thank you.
And so I think the 1% would be somewhat of a safe level.
I heard the explanation, Senate Bill 2355. I think we have to adopt the amendment, so I'll offer the amendment that was
If I can.
explained by Senator Ford. All in
No.
all in favor, say aye. Any opposed, nay? You guys have it. Now, Senator Simmons. You've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed, nay? The ayes have it. Thank you, and thank you, Chairman Ford. Turner Ford. Appreciate it. All right, we're gonna bump back up to, are you ready on 2322? And Senator Sparks, recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 2322 addresses our expungement statute, and it addresses a particular crime as relates to someone that has been convicted of prostitution, who has also been designated as someone who was humanly trafficked. There are some circumstances, and you can see operative language that talks about a person who is trafficked as defined by our code. The court may in its discretion order the record of conviction of any crimes of prostitution. That is something that in the sense of someone who's been trafficked and prostitution has been part of that trafficking situation, that we would like to give them a clean slate. The other thing that this bill does is that promoting prostitution is not an expungible offense. That is pimping to a great degree. That's not something that happens accidentally. That is a overt act, and that would not be expungible under this bill. That's an explanation. I would be glad to yield any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there any time limit on this expungement after conviction
As it relates to
to
the
expungement?
trafficked person, they fall under the same time limits that are currently in statute for felony or misdemeanor. It's just allowing them to have any convictions of prostitution, which, as I understand, is only a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
There is no such felony crime of prostitution. So it would be subject to the same time constraints. Thank you.
Did you have a question, Senator Simmons?
A friendly question, Mr. Chairman.
Recognize.
Yep, and, Daniel, Senator, remind me, is promoting prostitution, that is a felony, right?
It is.
Okay, I just.
Correct.
All right. any
Thank you.
other questions?
Thank you.
If not, for a motion,
Title sufficient, do pass.
for the motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? The ayes have it. All right, and we're gonna jump down to Senate Bill 2198. We have Senator McClendon, who authored the bill, and Senator Sparks, who's presenting the bill. So we'll hear, I think, first the explanation of the bill by Senator Sparks, and then we'll ask Senator McClendon if you'd like to give us a little word about why he did this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 2198 is titled Handle with Care legislation. What this is doing is allowing the Department of Public Safety to create a program that we see in other states that will be an opportunity if a child has been exposed to some violent event, a domestic violence event, maybe an arrest of a parent, some event that would potentially cause disruption to that child's life, that there would be a way to contact the school to let them know that there are issues that have arisen and that there are issues that will potentially affect that child's behavior. Just a handle with care. There is not a monetary issue here. It is simply a program of trying to give notification so that those institutions would have a little bit better understanding of maybe what's going on in the student's life. This is something that, as I understand it, the Department of Public Safety and Child Protective Services are working together on this. If there needs to be some amendable language to make sure that this program is successful. The bill does not have an appropriations piece, and I would have one amendment at the proper time to the language of the bill. I would yield any question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where it says the commissioner shall on line 18 employ, I would like to strike the word employ and insert the word designate. We simply are trying to have someone who is going to administer this program. So designate one or more persons deemed necessary to administer this program. And again, I believe they'll be working in conjunction with CPS to look at some other states that have this style program and see how we can implement it to maybe better inform our schools. Thank you.
Heard the explanation of the amendment. Any questions on the amendment? If not, for a vote, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? The ayes have it. Senator McClendon, we would like for you to address the committee about your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Sparks, for giving that explanation. We go on conferences every year to different topics that we're all near and dear to our hearts. Some insurance, some lawyer, some medical, all types of different ones. A number of us had gone this past year to West Virginia at Conference of Southern Legislators. And I was talking to a West Virginia senator there, and they had just implemented a Handle with Care Act due to children that have had been in an unfortunate, had wrong place at the wrong time, where they had seen or seen someone in their family had been involved with some kind of traumatic deal. And all they were trying to do is to notify the teachers, administrators of their school the next day to, if this child may be acting up, if this child may pull in and not, talking, if that child possibly, just did terrible on a certain grade, had a test that day, to, let's put a loving arm around them and let's see if we can help that child, because, we have so many children that see these different types of things. But it's a good bill. Department of Human Services and Commissioner Tindall both want to see this thing go and just work out whatever kinks they can between each of them. And I thank y'all for consideration.
Your filing of the bill and the explanation. All right, we're on Senate Bill number 2198. Any further questions for the author or the presenter? If not, Senator Sparks for motion.
Title sufficient do pass committee sub.
For the motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? The ayes have it. All right, thank you so much. Appreciate you. All right, Senate Bill number 2510 is dealing with gaming, the online, interactive, and computerized versions thereof, increasing the penalties. And I believe we have our commissioner with the Gaming Commission who is here. If you'll come forward and just have a seat here at the end so you can speak into the microphone. Please, sir, we would appreciate you kind of telling us maybe first why we need something like that, and then tell us a little bit about the bill that's before us. This is Commissioner Jay McDaniel.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to the committee. This 2510 brings forward 3 criminal code sections, and this is a joint proposal of the casino industry primarily in support of this, as well as the Gaming Commission, since we're the ones that investigate in conjunction with our partners, also prosecute these gaming crimes. And basically 9733-1 contains the penalties for just general gambling crimes. It kind of encompasses everything, whether you're playing, whether you're running a business. And for years, those have just been basically a $500 fine or 90 days in jail if you don't pay that fine. So in this age, the primary reason for this is the mobile and the online gaming, which is more and more prevalent today. So what we propose here, these are basically strengthen the penalties for those that operate gaming establishments illegal, as well as online platforms. If I charge an offshore operator with a $500 per occurrence fine, they're just going to write that check and keep on going. So what this basically does is escalate the operation of those online platforms to a felony level. You can have up to a $100,000 fine per occurrence, or actually I think a sum not exceeding $100,000, as well as imprisonment not exceeding 10 years. So 9733-1 does that for the business operator, not for the player. The player, if someone was playing, they would still have the $500 fine or 90 days. So this is going after the operators, those that compete with our legalized market and take tax revenue away from us by operating games illegally. And then when you move over to the other sections, it also adds what's called an online sweepstakes into our definition. These online sweepstakes are becoming more and more prevalent. I believe they're already illegal under our law because they're not really sweepstakes, but this adds that definition just to make it clear that y'all might see them. They're advertising now during football games, these online casinos. It just gives us more tools to combat that, and I welcome any questions you have.
So tell us about how much revenue you think the state of Mississippi is losing due to illegal online betting, that sort of thing that just
Sure.
goes on in the black market.
Sure. So the AGA estimates, that's the American Gaming Association, estimates about 500 billion wagered annually in illegal gaming. That's across the nation. If you look at our legal market, we're about 4% of legalized gambling. Mississippi has a pretty strong presence of legal gambling. And so if you just say we're 4% of that 500 billion illegally, you could be talking about 20 billion being wagered here. I don't know if it's that high, but I believe the amount wagered could be in the billions with these offshore operators. And then if you break that down into a tax revenue standpoint, you're talking about tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions we could potentially be losing. So it's hard to put a concrete dollar figure to it, but I would stake reputation that it's in the tens of millions or more that we're losing to offshore operators. These are sports books. These are online casinos. And, as sports betting has become more and more popular, people will see an advertisement on TV to bet on sports. And then when they find out you can't do it legally here outside of a casino, they're going to look for another alternative. And they find these illegal casinos sometimes, and they act like they're legal. They will misrepresent to the customer that this is a legal operation when in fact it's not.
The customer may not, in fact, know that what she or he is doing is illegal, which is why you're not addressing the penalties for the individual player. You're talking about the operators, in essence, the companies that are putting these platforms up and advertising, attracting people to use their platform, correct?
Exactly. That's right. The goal here would never to be go after a person, whether they're innocent or not. The goal is to shut down the operation. And just so y'all are aware, in the past year, I've sent 2 rounds of cease and desist letters to offshore operators. And I say offshore, some of them are actually domestic, identifying that you're violating our laws, and I have not gotten any of them to stop. So we're at the point of it's time to move into a prosecution phase. And I would like to be armed, whether it's our office, the Attorney General's office, a DA's office, armed with more to go after them than going through a justice court fine process, which is kind of where we are right now.
And have you seen an increase in the activity here in Mississippi based on some of the recent legal changes or law changes in our surrounding states?
Yes, definitely. When you see like Tennessee and Louisiana have online gaming now, and the more it gets legalized, the more people see it and say, I want to do that. And when they find out you can't do it here, again, outside of a casino, there are people that just look for an option. And because they're out there advertising, hey, come on our site and do this, people are going to do it. And I think a lot of times they just assume that it's okay, or else why would it be on my phone? So.
All right, questions, Senator Simmons?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a general question. I know we're not actually targeting the individuals they use the platform. Have as far as you know, have we actually prosecuted any of those individuals before and they were subject to that $500 fine or anything?
Not through my office since
Okay.
I've been director. I'll be honest, that is not our policy. Since this is a general criminal statute, you could have a local.
Yeah, I know.
And so I can't say that hasn't happened, but our office does not typically go. Sometimes what we will do when we shut down the operation, we will advise, the patrons, you
Yeah.
can be cited, we're giving you, but as far as taking them to court over that, we have not done that since I've been director.
And I know we're considering this bill now. Have we gone after any operators other than doing something more than just a cease and desist letter?
Not for the mobile, what you find online. No, not yet.
Okay.
It's something we're at the point it needs to be done.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Senator England had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McDaniel, you and I had a chance to speak about this earlier, and I just want to make sure to bring it up for the committee and for discussion. Want to make sure that we're not being so broad here that we include entertainment style gaming, PlayStation or Xbox or anything like that, that may be may seem like a casino-based game, and sometimes those groups will have a competition where they'll go into a group, and I believe that you told me you think that's already covered, but I just want to make sure that we continue to look at that, and if there's a possible amendment that I can make sure that we just tighten it up by the time we get onto the floor. I don't want to do that today, but because I do support this legislation, I just wanted to bring that up to you and to the committee, and especially to our attorney, very able attorney over here, that's something I would like to look at to make sure that we're not, grabbing those specific entities in with this bill.
Yes, and I'll just give you my opinion. Of course, we've got a bunch of attorneys. We could have a lot of different opinions, but
Right.
I believe what you're referring to, if I'm playing a game like on an Xbox or PlayStation, and sometimes they have events where I might pay an entry fee and I play and I can win, that is not fit the definition of gambling because you are not wagering on the outcome of something out of your control. If I were to wager on YouTube playing, it would. And so if that's something you're concerned about, that would need to be, something exempted because
That's right.
playing on the outcome of an event, sporting event, video game event, whatever is gambling. But paying an entry fee and maybe winning a prize, just like a golf tournament or something like that, would not fall under this definition. That's at least my opinion. So, but if you are concerned and wanted an exemption, if you look at 9733-8, that is where we define sweepstakes and online casinos. When that bill was passed a few years ago, if you'll note in section 5A, they were concerned about, the Chuck E. Cheese, the Margaritaville down on the Gulf Coast where kids can play games and win prizes. And that was specifically exempted to make sure, hey, when we're talking about internet online, it doesn't include, and it mentions if it's for the primary purpose of entertaining children under the age of 18 years. I do believe if you had something where you wanted to exempt something similar to that or some language like that could be added.
Okay, okay,
I think that'd be an appropriate place to do it.
okay. Thank you very much.
All right, Senator Sparks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had discussed this bill and there was some language that was amended, and I appreciate that. My understanding is that the primary target of this is the online platforms that are operating. That's where you're having trouble with the offshore people who refuse to respond to you properly. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. On line 38, the new language says that if any person shall, and it talks about an online platform that facilitates illegal wagering, guilty of a felony, the words "a business establishment" or that's a little broader than online. So I didn't know if that was the intent. If that's not the intent and that language is not needed to handle the online piece, I would have a motion at the proper time to remove those words, unless you're telling me that that's necessary for the online piece.
Senator, I appreciate that. I did not send this language for this committee substitute, so I do believe, I do hear your concern. What I would say you could do if you wanted to do, because I agree that the business establishments that we physically have located in our states, I will say sometimes just physically going in there and seizing their games is enough of a deterrent. So if you wanted to leave a physical business establishment either in the first section or create maybe a lesser penalty for that, and then break out or online platform and have that with the increased penalties, I think that would be an absolutely fine amendment if you wanted to break that out, or if you wanted to strike business establishment. I just think that the business establishment should still be in there somewhere, maybe up in the lesser fine, because when you're going into a physical business, taking the games out of the business is usually enough to cost them money to make them.
Sir, and I thought that was the intent. I just wanted to make sure we didn't.
Yeah, I honestly
complicate it.
thought when you got the committee sub that was going to be broken out.
Okay,
but,
so I will make thank you if that's appropriate, make the amendment to, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna strike, my motion would be to strike, business establishment or at this time. And if there needs to be a breaking out in, something before we go to the floor, I'll be glad to get with drafting and with your team to make sure that we've got that just like we need it, if that's appropriate. But at this time, I would just move to strike, business establishment or from line 38.
All right, you've heard the amendment. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Senator Hickman.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. One, well, are these like these bad actors are typically people who are not located in our state? Is that?
That's correct. Certainly the ones that run the platform, that facilitate the platform. Sometimes there will be, I'll just use the local bookie might use that platform to facilitate his business. But the behind the scenes, what you can get onto is typically not even domestic. A lot of times they're offshore. So it's already very difficult to attack them. So the goal here by these increased penalties, one, you're sending a message that the day of doing business here is done, but it also gives us the ability to, when you're going through circuit court and the ability to get warrants and maybe even forfeit assets that they're using, I think this bill would help that significantly.
And I'm asking these questions again. I think what you're doing is fine. I'm just trying to get a conceptualize what's going on. I guess they would fall under this, but we're not generally, people that you're trying to get to are not generally like these big companies that may not, because most of those have geo-fenced us out, like I think FanDuel.
Oh, absolutely.
Although, but we're talking about like basically black market.
That's exactly right. You're right.
So my final question is, would I be exempt if I lose money on one of these and then turn them in because of that?
I would give you immunity. I absolutely
All right, I
would.
appreciate it.
Good questions. Any other comments, questions? Senator McCon? Yeah. Use the microphone. There you go.
So my question is, I see a contingency contract listed in here. Yeah. So tell me, do you currently have contracts in place with regard to forfeited assets? Or is this new language where you're entering into, it's 242.
Yes.
The commission may enter into contingency fee agreements for assets forfeited in connection with prosecution. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so that was put in section 758, allows for contingency contracts between a prosecuting agency, other agencies that work together just to enter into agreements. And it just makes it, I think 758 allows for that already. I think this was just added in to make it clear that during the course of this prosecution, whether it be through the Attorney General's office, a district attorney, a federal prosecutor, that the commission would have the authority to enter into those agreements. And I do, if I recall when we were going through this, I believe my AG attorney suggested that, but I think that was just to clarify that under 758, we could do that.
What I see on 151, 152, and 153 there, you already got, shall be liable to forfeiture to the state of Mississippi or to the county. I just don't, I don't want to hear my DAs jump up and say, wait now, you're giving them the authority to take it. If they were working with you in conjunction, I don't know. I don't want there to be a problem at any point, where they're saying the state's taking everything and nothing's coming back to to the counties who are out there doing. farming.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we have the language in there about forfeiture, I think that it's actually strengthened by the provisions you said that if we do work with another agency, we could enter agreements ahead of time that you're going to get portion this, whatever portion we want to agree to. And, we're not in the business of trying to make money off of it. So it'd be, if I get help from a DA, I'd love for them to be able to keep any cash assets or anything that would help them in a case like this.
All right, good questions. Senator Simmons.
Just one question. I know a lot of people do like fantasy sports. Is Underdog legal?
Underdog is actually licensed in our state to have fantasy contests right now.
Okay.
So the Fantasy Contest Act kind of has another carve out.
Okay.
Whether it's a casino carve out, charitable gaming carve out, fantasy, it would not. In fact, these entities compete with those licensed tax paying entities.
Okay. And then like when people that engage in Yahoo fantasy and all that's legal.
That's
Okay.
as long as they're licensed. We have 4 licensed fantasy operators right now in our state:
And what are they?
DraftKings, FanDuel, Yahoo, and Underdog.
Okay. Thank you.
And how much, just to remind the committee members, how much revenue is generated annually by the gaming industry in Mississippi?
So the casino, just looking at the casinos by themselves, last year was 2.4 billion in gaming revenue, which equates to a tax of about 200 million to the state and another 100 million to the local government. So about 300 million tax benefit. And any one of these large operators obviously eats into that.
And the casino industry is in favor of this legislation, I'm told.
That's correct. They put me in the firing line. This is their, they are, because honestly, we do work together to identify, to attempt our best to keep them out of our state. And we're really just ramping up those efforts. It's just gotten to a point where they're openly advertising. If you Google cease and desist letters by other state regulatory, you'll see we're not the only state with this problem. I've got, my regulatory counterparts are trying to stop it, and really federal help is what's really needed. But until we get that, it's kind of a state by state effort to stop it.
All right, any other questions, comments? All right, if not, for motion. All right, you've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed, nay. The ayes have it. All right, Senator Wiggins, did you want to defer on the 2330 homeless? No, that wasn't yours, was it? I'm sorry. Let me back up. That was Senator McMahon's. I don't see him here yet, so we will jump back up to 2201, the very first bill on the agenda. This bill is very straightforward proposition. You'll recall a couple of years back, legislature made it illegal to have like basically devices or cameras placed on traffic signal lights or poles that would track a vehicle going at a certain speed, scan the license plate, and if they were exceeding the speed limit, mail them a ticket instead of, actually issuing a ticket along, with a highway patrolman along the side of the road pulling you over. We outlawed that. But now what is happening in certain municipalities across the state to get around this particular prohibition in the law, they have devices now where you hold them by hand. So an officer is not stationed on a pole or a light post or a traffic signal. They actually hold them in their hand. You drive by, it does the same thing. It scans the license plate. It shows that you're going in excess of the speed limit, and it mails you a ticket. I know in Hattiesburg, I've had lots of calls and complaints from people who would say something to the effect of, I get a ticket in the mail. I wasn't even driving my vehicle that day. It was my son or daughter or my spouse or my friend, and the devices don't always capture the driver on the video. It only captures like the license plate. So you can see the car is going or the truck in excess of a certain speed in violation of the law, but you don't have proof of who the driver was. And of course, traffic violations go to the driver, not to the vehicle. So this is why you see in lines 27, 28, and 29, it just simply outlines that automated recording equipment or system shall include any automated recording equipment or system operated manually by a law enforcement officer, as opposed to just the stationary ones you would post on a light post of some sort. That's the bill. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Senator Hill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the bill, because I've had constituents affected by this as well. The question or comment that I would have is we also have these cameras that are capturing tags for insurance purposes to send out citations for liability insurance. And we already have a statute on the books that says an officer basically has to have some other cause to stop a person before they even check on insurance. So my question is, even if we pass this bill, I believe it's already illegal to do this under this statute and for the insurance one, under the other insurance statute. Who is going to help us enforce this law? Because these laws are being ignored all over by these municipalities, what's on our books. And I thank you for the attempt to clarify this, but I want to make sure that we capture and that we stop this insurance camera thing as well, because they're already in violation of the insurance statute, as well as this one, I believe, because it works the same way.
I understand there is a bill, I think, coming from the House already, maybe, that has passed that is a little more encompassing, that captures all those devices as well, dealing with the insurance piece and things of that nature.
But my question is, and my problem is, as I read statutes, it's already illegal. So if we pass another law that tries to clarify that it's illegal, how do we know that we're even going to get that enforced? I mean, do we need some type of penalty in here, or?
Once it's illegal, certainly
Because we don't,
persons aggrieved can bring a lawsuit against the offender and say this is an illegal, law, and try to get the courts to intervene. But if you wanted to put some sort of law enforcement entity as a monitor of this, or a place of recourse, certainly.
I think if we could add some language into this bill where if the law is violated, that maybe that the Attorney General's office or some law enforcement can actually step in and help the aggrieved person, rather than them having to try to hire a lawyer and file a civil suit. And I don't know exactly the language that I would want, but council could help with that, because I want some enforcement mechanism, because I can read, I graduated valedictorian in my class, and I know what they're doing is already illegal.
Exactly.
So I want some type of enforcement mechanism for these people, so they won't have to go and hire a lawyer and sue these folks over these cases. So whatever the language that y'all think would be pertinent for this, so that the Attorney General could enforce this, or someone could enforce it, because actually it's the law enforcement doing it. So I mean, we could have DPS, but I'm open to suggestions on it. I saw Dennis shaking his head. He's a smart attorney over there. If he has any suggestions, I'd be willing to listen.
Thank you for your comments. Questions? Senator Barnett? We need,
Reading lines 27, which is automated recording equipment or system includes any automated recording system or systems operated manually. If I'm reading this right, that means that someone has to be standing there physically holding this, right? But the problem is, right now, I think it's mounted and the person is, so should we add the word fixed in there, meaning that if it's actually physically located on something, i.e. a pole or a stop sign or something like that, fixed or? On what line?
23 and 22. Yeah, the installed language is already in present law on line 22. An optical device installed to work in conjunction with the traffic control signal or radar speed detection equipment, or both, designed to record the images that depict the license plate to the rear of a motor vehicle that is not operating in compliance with instructions. And then, so that was already illegal if they just fix it on a post or a pole or a traffic light. What some municipalities are using to get around that is they take it off the pole and they say, here, officer, stand here on the street corner and hold it. And it does the same thing, but yet it's not fixed. It can be moved, because the officer is walking around or driving around and holding it instead of it being fixed on a pole. What we're trying to get around.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that
You're right.
that we're capturing exactly what it is that we're trying to do. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hill?
One more question. I want to make, they've been shooting radar forever with the radar gun.
Yes.
But what we want to capture is these, taking pictures of these tags and not pursuing the person and finding out who's driving. So I just want to make sure that we're not capturing radar guns in this language
No.
that. in this
Radar guns are
underline.
fine, because
Okay.
they're manually handled and then they pull you over and tell you how fast you were going and what
Yeah.
the speed zone was and give you the
This is
ticket.
just something that, got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Heard all the comments, questions for motion, title sufficient to pass. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The ayes have it. All righty. There was a bill here that is not on your agenda, but it's been handed out because it was passed out of Jud A earlier this morning. If you will look at it, it's 2328. It's in a separate little packet there. It deals with Senator Michelle's attempt to assist our, real estate professionals and I guess people that own properties, and we have squatters. So I'm going to ask Ethan, if he will, to give us an explanation of what this bill does.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 2328 applies to persons that are squatting in commercial or residential buildings that have never had a lease agreement with the property owner. And it's a procedure for the property owner to contact the local sheriff and get those persons removed. There's also a procedure where a notice has to be placed on the property and time given for the squatter to contact the sheriff's office themselves. If they do, then the sheriff determines whether they believe them or not. And if they do, then they can refuse to put the person out. And then the property owner can go through the residential eviction status, even though they've never had a lease agreement with that squatter. And then the other subset of the bill fixes an issue. It just kind of clarifies and codifies current practice by the majority of counties for the service of a warrant of removal. But we have a few outlier counties that are not following that. So that's the second purpose of the bill. And this was crafted off of Florida's law, its current Florida law. And then the due process provision was added in the drafting process to where the squatter can actually contact the sheriff's department, and the sheriff's department's contact information is required on the notice. And that's a quick summary.
It's a good explanation. Any questions, Senator Hill?
So we couldn't remove them under current trespass laws because, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people and they say, well, we don't have squatters' rights in Mississippi. But my question is, we cannot remove somebody that's illegally trespassing with no lease agreement on private property right now?
I think we have some folks here maybe from the Realtor community who would like to, maybe, I know they're supporting the.
I'm willing to help them, but I just,
Yeah, one of y'all would like to stand and come to the table and address yourself, who you are and who you represent and why you want this bill.
Waverly Harkins, and I represent the Apartment Association. So the Apartment Association has had problems if, let's say, a legitimate tenant leaves and you have a squatter in the property. When the Landlord-Tenant Act encompasses a tenant, which is someone who has a written oral agreement. So when they file complaints, that's landlord v. John Doe, we don't even get before a judge. The clerk will not accept the complaint because it doesn't have the name of the tenant. And then they've gone to precincts and said, okay, we have a trespasser, and the precincts have they've told them this is a civil matter. They've said this is a civil matter. So they've been stuck in a gray area, not being able to remove squatters.
we definitely want to make it a matter that they can take care of. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions, Senator Simmons?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly support the legislation, and I know we've actually considered a lot of bills in various committees that speaks to this issue. It, are you opposed to reverse repealer?
I mean, of course, we want it passed, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure, if there's something we need to work on.
I was just thinking maybe if we start looking at all these bills and then we just actually try to have oh, it has to go back? Oh,
yeah.
oh, my bad. I didn't know. Okay.
The realtors had a bill and then we added.
No, I'm sorry.
Right. Good question, comments? Anybody? Yeah, okay. All right, the motion, Senator Barr, title sufficient to pass. All in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. The ayes have it. All right, we're whittling this down. Senate Bill number 2335. I may have to bump over to Ms. Robertson and get some assistance with that. Or to Ethan. This one is a bill, I think the Lieutenant Governor feels strongly about this one because he asked me about filing it, so I know that he had some interest in it. So basically, I think it's modeled off of situations like in Michigan where you had a school shooter, a child, that was in school. His parents had purchased him the firearm, and that child had been very troubled, had lots of issues, and yet the parent still goes and buys him a firearm, and he then takes it and uses it and kills a bunch of kids in the classroom. So the prosecutors in Michigan, which was sort of novel, but they not only go after the child who did the shooting, but they went after the parents and said, hey, you had ample reason to believe that your child has been having issues, he's been troubled, he's been making threats about killing people, and your answer to that is to go buy him a firearm, 2335. 23, yeah, 35. About midway through the packet. And so the prosecutors in Michigan use their laws to be able to go and bring actions against the parent. I think this also happened maybe in Georgia as well recently at another school shooting incident. So obviously these are cases that happen far too often, but thankfully not, often here in Mississippi. But I think the governor thought that perhaps if this were to ever happen again in Mississippi, we wanted prosecutors to have the ability, if in fact it could be proven that the parents were negligent in providing, firearms or whatever to aid to the child when they should have known otherwise or better, that there would be an ability to bring the parents to account, not just the shooter himself or herself. So you can see the language in lines starting at 18 through 20, well, actually all the way through 44 is brand new, and I will turn it over to Mr. Samsel to kind of break it down for us.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the lines that Senator Fillingane just mentioned create a new crime, and subsection 1 says it shall be unlawful for any parent or guardian to negligently, intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly commit any act or omit the performance of any duty which act or commission contributes to the criminal action of any child who is convicted as an adult in circuit court. So it's only going to be very serious crimes such as armed robbery or murder. And then the second subsection is it shall be unlawful for any parent or guardian to do the same, or commit or omit the performance of any duty which act or omission tends to contribute. So that would be some more flexibility for the prosecutor. And then there are two different punishments. So if you do one that actually is able to be shown to contribute, then you get 3 years to 25 years and a $10,000 fine. And then the 10 to commit is 1 year to 15 years and a $5,000 fine. A child under this is defined as a person 18 or under, so it doesn't relate to the definition of minority. Section 3 adds negligently into our child abuse statute 97-539, so criminal negligence. And then at the end of the bill, I don't remember the section number, section 4 strikes a cap on civil liability for property owners. So any property owner shall be entitled to recover damages and court costs. In the original 93-13-2, there was a cap of up to $5,000. So that would remove that cap from the parents of any minor under the age of 18 years and over the age of 10 who maliciously and willfully damage or destroy property belonging to such owner. And that's the summary of the bill, Mr. Chairman.
All right, you've heard a summary. Questions, Senator Hickman?
And I didn't get it clear. Was this modeled after an event in Michigan or modeled after a law that Michigan has?
Not a law, an event. Yeah.
An event.
Other questions? Comments? Senator Norwood?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On line 225 through 227, it says shall not apply to a parent whose parental custody or control of such child have been removed. So that means a non-custodial parent would be exempt from this?
I think in that section, yes, sir. If the court has ordered removal of the child from that parent, for civil liability purposes, then I guess you're saying it's hard to hold that parent liable if the child has been court ordered removed from that parent, so they have no longer legal control over
contact.
what that child does. Can't then turn around and fine him or her that they weren't in charge any longer.
Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. All right, any other questions, comments? If not, motion is House sufficient to pass. All in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Let's do a show of hands. All in favor say, raise your right hand. And all opposed, raise your right hand. All right, the noes have it. Bill does not pass. All right. Thank you. Let me double check everything we got going on in here. What about, is anyone here on 2330? This was Senator or Chairman McMahon's bill out of municipalities. Anybody? Okay. All right. Any other bills before Senator Hill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of days ago when we were meeting, I held that domestic violence bill on a motion to reconsider the vote. And if the committee would reconsider the vote, I would commit to them that we would put elements in the crime of second offense domestic violence felony, like Senator Wiggins discussed earlier today on the bill that the Attorney General's office had, and that I would work with them to tighten up the language very tight. And some of the ideas we had would to only include domestic partnership violence, and to require that there's evidence of physical injury so that it's not a text message. So those are the types of language that I would like to see this bill move with a reverse repealer, so that we could try to tighten up that language so that we could actually get a felony on second offense if certain elements were proven on that crime. And I would just ask that the committee would reconsider the vote and let it move on with a reverse repealer. And there's no guarantee that it would ever come out of conference, but I would like the opportunity to just try to work on tightening up the language.
Okay, so Senator Hill, you're recognized for a motion, and your motion would be to reconsider the vote whereby the bill failed.
Right. The motion would be to reconsider the vote by which the bill failed.
All right. You've heard the motion. Are there any questions, Senator Hill, on our motion? Anyone wishing to speak in favor or opposed to the motion? All right. Heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay? Well, let's have a show of hands. All in favor of bringing the motion to reconsider the vote whereby the bill failed, raise your hand. 1, 2. And those opposed to the motion, please raise your hand. Chair is no longer doubt. All right.
May I comment before we adjourn?
I don't really think there's, I'll recognize you do. Whatever you'd like.
I'll be brief. We're making a felony for somebody to play an online game that's not authorized by the state of Mississippi, but we're still allowing it to be a misdemeanor for somebody to beat on their wife, and I just don't understand that. Thank you.
All right. At this point, I don't anticipate, unless there are any double referred bills coming out of any of y'all's committees that would come to us. I don't anticipate that, but at present, we'll do a motion to rise and report.
Mr. Chairman,
Sorry.
before we go, just in case we come back, I would like to hold Senate Bill 2335 on a motion to reconsider.
35 on a motion to reconsider. All right. Duly noted. All right. Rise and report. All right. I'm sorry, Reed, what'd you say?